everybody, it's Mafdominus, and welcome back to another episode of Mafdominus at the Theater. I'm going to be watching Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, and my theater had this special offering called Beetlejuice. It's this weird soda thing. I'm going to try it for the very first time. It was sour, alright. They warned me it was going to be sour. Alright, let's go watch this movie. Well, I just got back from the theater watching Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. Now, before I begin this review, I just want to showcase you guys my shelf with my stuff in it. Obviously, a lot of these figures are categorized in their own little sections. So the Transformers are there, the Marvel characters are there. And overall, I think I organized this into my sort of style, you know, the sense of style that I enjoy pop culture stuff, but obviously giving it a little bit of my own personality. I added some new lights back there, and overall, I think I did a pretty good job on it. Now, I have an idea on how to use these lights for future videos. Obviously, the lights are green right now, but they can change color, and I'm thinking of changing the colors of the lights depending on the topic of the video. For example, the lights are green right now because, well, green is my favorite color, but also because it's a Beetlejuice related video. He has green hair, there is green motifs in the afterlife, and I'm thinking, depending on the topic of a video, the colors can change. So it can be blue for Avatar, red for Spider-Man, yellow for the B-movie. Whatever the color is, it corresponds to the topic of the video. But obviously the shelf can be its own video one day. Right now, you guys just want to see my review on Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. Well, this movie is pretty good, but it's not as good as the first Beetlejuice movie. That first Beetlejuice movie is an instant classic. It's one of the funniest movies I've ever seen, and I'm honestly surprised they were able to drop the F-bomb with a PG rated still intact. Yeah, the movie's rated PG, but they drop an F-bomb, and let's just say Beetlejuice is not exactly the most kid-friendly character. He makes a lot of innuendos. He's a disgusting, perverted freak. But we love him for that. He's an absolutely hilarious character because of that. So it makes sense that that first movie is a classic, it's iconic, and one of Tim Burton's best films. But now we're getting a sequel nearly 30 years later, and, well, it's not a bad movie. It's a really good movie, but it's not as good as the first one. It takes place 30 years after the events of the first movie. Lydia Deetz, the goth girl from the first movie, is now all grown up. She has a daughter of her own named Astrid, but their relationship is strained because Astrid's father has died, and because of that they started to distance themselves, especially because Astrid doesn't really believe that her mother has supernatural abilities to see undead people. Yeah, sucks to have a mother and daughter relationship that's strained, but on top of that, Lydia has an abusive boyfriend. Well, not a punchy abusive boyfriend, but the sort of psychologically manipulated type of boyfriend, you know, that kind of abuse. But things get worse for her, because her father dies, and they go back to the old ghost house in honor of his memory to do some renovations, and obviously the ghost house from the first movie, where Beetlejuice still haunts it. What's going on with him? Well, Beetlejuice has sort of became a manager for the afterlife, but then his ex-wife, yeah, believe it or not, Beetlejuice has an ex-wife, named Dolores, who is best described as a sort of goth MILF. I'll say that much. Basically, she's been reformed, she came back, and now she's after Beetlejuice's soul. Obviously, Beetlejuice and the other characters in the afterlife are dead, but they can become even more dead because Dolores has the power to suck their souls, making them even more dead. And obviously the stakes are high. Beetlejuice needs to go into hiding to hide from Dolores. And then he finds out that Lydia is back in the old house. So this is his chance to potentially reunite with her and rekindle that sort of weird marriage from that first movie. That's the basic premise of the sequel. It's just like the first movie in a lot of ways. It's mostly about the characters, how they interact with this world where the afterlife exists, the sort of relationship between Lydia and Astrid, that mother-daughter relationship where they have to try and make up because obviously they're mother and daughter. They shouldn't be fighting, especially over something like the death of their father. Not to mention, just like the first movie, Beetlejuice is not in this movie that often, but he does show up more. In the first movie, Beetlejuice doesn't show up until like an hour into the movie. But in here, he has a much bigger presence. He shows up a lot more. He has more scenes in the beginning and intertwined between the plot of Lydia and the funeral and the wedding. There's moments where Beetlejuice is trying to hide from his ex-wife, as well as you get to see a lot more stuff from the afterlife. The best parts of this movie are the afterlife scenes, where you get to see so many of these wacky dead people, these ghosts that are in different positions, how they died. Like, for example, there's a surfer who obviously got his entire body cut in half. There's some Santa creature, I guess it was once human, who was kind of burned and stuff. You can assume he might have incinerated himself while trying to play the role of Santa. There's just a lot of wacky characters that really fits into the style of Tim Burton. And I absolutely love Tim Burton's style of sort of undead but very lively, cartoonish sort of style. And I absolutely love it. The afterlife are the best parts of this movie. And Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice himself, man, that guy, he's played Beetlejuice over 30 years ago, and even when he does come back to play the role once more, he still got it. He still has that comedic charm to him. Michael Keaton is absolutely great in his role because it feels like he hasn't lost his touch. He's still that really funny, perverted, mean-spirited guy who can give you a chuckle every once in a while, make you laugh really hard and stuff like that. It's really good that Michael Keaton still is able to play Beetlejuice pretty well, as Beetlejuice is probably one of the funniest parts of this movie. I can't get enough of his performance. Speaking of performances, I definitely think that Lydia, played by Winona Ryder, all grown up, is pretty good. She definitely captures that sort of woman who's kind of tired of everything because she's a ghost and stuff, sort of depressing. You know, I definitely like her more worried panic. But the dynamic between, you know, Lydia and Astrid, the daughter, is the core of the film. You see, just like the original movie, Beetlejuice is not exactly the main focus of the movie because it's mostly about ghosts, hauntings, and the afterlife, and themes of death and stuff like that. That's what this movie mostly captures. But unlike the first movie, Beetlejuice has a much bigger presence in the sequel because there's a subplot of his ex-wife trying to hunt him down. So he has a much bigger presence, so it's a lot more entertaining, but because it's a lot more Beetlejuice oriented, it can feel like it's not as emotionally deep as that first movie. It's still pretty emotional sometimes because obviously it deals with death and stuff, but it's not as really deep as the first movie. But then again, the first movie wasn't too deep. It was a comedy after all. Beetlejuice is definitely an entertaining horror undead comedy. And if that's your thing, then I definitely would recommend this movie. If I had any sort of criticism for this movie, though, is that it does kind of drag a bit within the first 30 minutes. It definitely has a lot of setup that it needs to build in order to get the plot flowing. Not to mention, a lot of the characters in these movies, there's like a lot of characters. You know, there's Willem Dafoe's character, there's the abusive boyfriend, there's Lydia's stepmom, played by, you know, the woman from Home Alone, and there's Dolores, there's all these characters, but not all of them get their time to shine. So a lot of plot threads don't really feel all that satisfying by the end of the movie. Plus, the end of Beetlejuice does kind of, sort of, reuse the climax of the first movie, so there's that wedding thing and all that, and it feels like a repeat of the first movie, similar to how Ghostbusters 2 is kind of a repeat of the first movie. It doesn't mean this movie's bad, though. Those are just my criticisms. It feels like there's not enough for these ragtag group of characters to do. There's so much that this movie has that it wants to do, but it doesn't have time to satisfyingly wrap it all. I mean, heck, Dolores is not even in this movie that often, even though she's one of the main antagonists. So don't expect her to show up that often. But besides these minor criticisms that I had, I still think this movie is pretty entertaining, but it's just not as good as the first movie. If I had to give this movie a rating, it would probably be a 7 out of 10. It's an entertaining flick for sure, but not as deep or as funny as the first movie. But if you're a fan of Beetlejuice, then this movie is for you. It's definitely entertaining. Well, I think that's what I have to say about Beetlejuice. It's a pretty entertaining movie. Not as great as the first one, but I don't think you'll get bored watching it. You just gotta get past those first 30 minutes and that's it. Well, thank you guys for watching this review, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.